Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual technology frontier to discuss their perceptions, perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. My name is Kevin Feenan, better known as Phelan Cormel in Second Life, and with me today is Pooky Amsterdam. Pooky is... Hi, Pooky. Pooky is the co-host and producer and writer for The First Question, as most people here know, which is Treat TV's weekly quiz show to the stars, and also hosts The Dating Casino, which is also a weekly show that explores romantic relationships. Between both of these shows and others, she's hosted or produced over 140 shows, which is an incredible number since May of 2008. Pooky, welcome.
Thank you, Phelan. Thank you very much. And
so has it really been like over 140? For some reason, I thought you'd done more.
It's more, yeah. I just did 120 shows for The First Question. We did the 120th episode this week. And we have, I think, 37 dating casinos. So with my super math skills, I'm thinking that's about 157.
157. So we're going to have a big party when you hit 200, right?
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be the first question to hit the 200th show. First, God, that's only 80 more.
It is, but it's fairly incredible because I mean, if you sort of think about it, I mean, they're like the Simpsons made this big deal when they hit 400. Right, which is, you know, it's not exactly a minor milestone. I mean, how do I put this? The consistency in which a lot of these shows are produced, and the consistency with which you've brought The First Question to Second Life, and then out through Treat TV and other avenues. I mean, it's just it's quite an accomplishment.
It takes, I had a background in doing shows online since 2003 when I did a weekly poetry slam and then did a number of other venues in another MMO called a Habbo Hotel. And what I learned is that as I'm sure you know, is that if you give people a show on a regular basis of good quality, they'll show up. It can expand an audience. It's very hard, you know, in virtual worlds, it's kind of, there's certainly the desire by people to be able to go on anytime they want, stay for however long they want, and then leave, right? To do a show is a different level of commitment, and to book and write and host and produce this 30 minutes of a jewel, right, a small treasure, I feel, every week, takes a commitment. Now, when you cross into that area, you can then begin delivering a product on a regular basis, which becomes standard or becomes worth something. But it's a different, it's absolutely a different kind of, mindset.
The difference between just doing a one-off type show compared to a one-off event compared to a show.
Yes.
An ongoing, yes. Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of staying power that's required to do something like that, and a lot of, depending on how you want to look at it, stubbornness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tenacity. There's tons of that, which sort of goes onto it into producing something like that. I know that's the biggest thing that I've noticed in Second Life here is there's a lot of things that we see that sort of come and go. Mm-hmm. Inside the Second Life environment, and it's interesting when you look over a period of years and you see those particular groups which are extremely consistent in terms of what it is that they're doing, in terms of the product that they're producing and how they're going about it. I mean, even if it's not to, and not to suggest in any way, don't take this the wrong way. It's interesting to see the different levels of quality that go into certain things, but I mean, quality is certainly one aspect to it. I think consistency is another, because I mean, one of the things that we've seen is you take a look at groups like New Citizens Incorporated, you look at groups like New Medium Consortium, you look at ISTE, you look at the Nokia group, you look at
look at Science Friday. Science Friday was something that had created such an audience that even after Ira left, the show continued because it had become something of an institution, something that people really wanted. Yeah. And I admire Zazenman very much for that. For picking it up.
Yeah. How much? So obviously you've spoken, because I mean the first question has 3 guests on per show. So that's an awful lot of people that you've had an opportunity to talk to. I mean, how many of those people have you seen where things have sort of come and gone, compared to those people that have sort of been really die-in-the-wool consistent in terms of what they've been doing in here?
That's a great question. When I look at the first people, and I had a big moment, I guess, last week, because April 10th was the date of the very first show that I did. Actually, then, of course, it was called The Second Question. And the people who I had on the show, Troy McLuhan, he's still very much a part of Second Life. Paradox Oberth, who's here. Perplexity Peckable, Chloe Greenwood, that there are people who made a commitment because they know the power and scope and reach of, I was going to say what it is to be virtual, but it's so much more than that, isn't it, Kevin? It's reaching people in a place where, and as I look at my computer screen now, and as all of us who are watching this are in front of a computer screen, we lean forward. There's a energy and a relationship with this screen that we don't have with the television. And when you can also become an avatar and enter this with other people, the possibilities that can happen are truly limited only by your imagination. I mean, and there's a lot of famous quotes, believe me, along those lines. We see it, we do it, it feeds us to do more, and so I'm not surprised that a lot of the people who've been on the show, and then again, Phelan, you were on one of the first shows. I mean, Curious George was on one of the first shows. Sloan was on one of the first shows. Harper Beresford, Bevan Whitfield. Hydra's been with me for every show. I mean, I'm talking about people who really know and have an investment in what can be achieved in a virtual world. I don't expect these number of people are scientists and educators. There's a commitment there that they brought with them to the grid, I think.
Well, I certainly know that the number of people that I've met over the years since I've been here have been, I mean, they've been all across the gambit, and it's been interesting to see some of the groups that have come and gone. Some of the people that, and I'm quite sure you've seen the same thing. I mean, you see people that talk a good game, but then when it really comes time to, and I'm apologizing for using, because there's a bunch of idioms that actually are very appropriate to the conversation, but I mean, like when the rubber hits the road here, so to speak, there's a number of people that you sort of look to, or at least I find anyways, that you tend to look to as being more of a mentor, an example to be held up to others. And no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess I'm so in love with all of us that I think there's worth and value in people even just coming onto Second Life for a small amount of time, or having a conversation with a friend, or just looking for something, whether it be a boat, a pair of shoes, or a pet, that makes them happy for however long it does. I'm a full believer in what can raise or reach someone being of value, and I also feel it is not for me to judge anyone else. There's a lot of room for people to do what they want and what they need, and who knows if this brief encounter today will lead in a couple of years' time to something that will deliver a greater commitment to something that's going to be more, let's say, game-changing. I know what you mean, that there are people who, flit in and out, but for whatever reasons, we've all had that time in our life when we came in and had to light for only a short time before we moved on to something with which we found more meaning. I'm really appreciative of all of us who bring, that glimmer of excitement and human energy to the grid. I think everybody contributes in some way something here, and I really feel like we are all breathing a rarefied ether that when we close our eyes at night we still take with us.
Well, it's kind of interesting because that sort of leads into the topic that I'd sort of really selected for today that I really want to talk to you about, which is this concept that the reality that we have around us is a socially constructed reality, that people create their own reality, that in a sense that all the world's a stage, right? And in some cases, such as like what some of the aspects to what you're doing, I mean that's both metaphorical and literal in terms of a lot of things that you're doing. But when you talk about this idea of the quality of time that people, it's not about the quantity of time that people come in here, but it's the quality of time that they spend and the energy that they bring in and the influences that they have. How do you see those things sort of influence? I'm doing really. The brain is working. The mouth isn't influencing the way we interact with one another and the way we construct that reality around us.
How about if we both press our foreheads to the screen and then know what each other is feeling? I sometimes think that happens. I can't really speak for other people, Phelan. That's, I can only sort of speak for myself, and I also know that we all have things that we have to personally live up to, and things that we must do and ways we must be in order to make it to the end of our day. And what is for me is for me. I can't expect other people to be like that. Or can I look into their head? When you're a kid, you think like the way you live and what you think is the same way as everybody else, and then you grow up and you realize, oh my God, people have different houses or streets or neighborhoods, and I guess that's also been part of what I've learned here in Second Life is to open up my range of thinking, and that I really love. I have a feeling I really did not answer your question at all, so if you could rephrase it, I would be eternally grateful.
No problem. I guess one one of the things that through my doctoral studies and what have you, because I mean, most people that know me understand that I was working on a doctorate at the University of Phoenix for a while. One of the things that we used to look at was this idea of the social construction of reality, and how, you know, to a large extent, people are a stage unto themselves. And they have these little bubbles that they sort of interact within. So you have one bubble which is your work bubble, and one bubble which is your friend bubble, and one bubble which is your bar buddies, and one bubble which is your sporting friends or what have you, right? The people you play football with, or whoever else. And it's interesting because within here we have so much variety that we have available to us in terms of what we can do. We can be whoever we want. We can do whatever we want. We can.
Oh, that's an interesting. That's very interesting.
We can change the reality around us, and as a result, all of these things that we create have an influence, from my perspective, on the way we see ourselves. They're just different slices of who we are, and so I'm wondering, from your perspective, how you're seeing the concept of, the way you've constructed the reality around yourself, or the way you've seen reality constructed around other people. Okay. How has that influenced the way you've sort of evolved over the last few years that you've been involved as a avatar?
I think you're speaking about the bubbles that we're in is a wonderful metaphor. When we have these bubbles, and you say the buddy bubble, the bar bubble, the friends at the office bubble, these are bubbles of safety and bubbles of comfort. And that's because we meet them with a self that has sort of all of the potential for hurt, in a sense, on the outside, our human selves. And so if we are vulnerable, we avoid something, or if we're scared of something, we shy away from it. When we have these bubbles, I think they are bubbles of comfort. What we can do as avatars are use an identity that we feel comfortable in because we created it from the inside out. I was asked recently to write and to contribute to 2 different websites, and I insisted on using the name Pooky Amsterdam. I said, why on earth would you want any other name? Because this is the name that truly has meaning in the industry that I'm at. And they said, no, we need to use your real name. And I thought to myself that was very, I said, all right, when I change my name legally to Pooky Amsterdam, I'll come back to you. But this is the name. And they said, all right, fine. And that was it. I'll give an example that I thought of recently. And I guess women are more likely to color their hair in real life. If you are, let's say, a brunette, and you want to dye, though of course men do as well, and you want to dye your hair red, and you feel much more comfortable as a redhead, that's not necessarily your real hair color, but that's who you are. And that's what Second Life also affords, is that you're constructing someone that reflects a reality, that reflects a truth to your core being that is so much closer to you than your body on the outside. For example, what if somebody was unable to use all of their facilities in the physical world, in what is known by some as real life? And in Second Life, they could run and walk, and of course have all of the freedom of movement, would you say that was less real for them? I wouldn't. I'd say that they were getting really closer to a true and core value and something that had a whole lot of meaning to them. So I think that our identities are forged, and we form a commitment to them because we've created something we really want and really believe in, as well as the tremendous freedom that it offers, as well as the equalizing the plane. And I'll also speak a bit about the attractiveness, because people talk about, why is everybody so good looking? In real life, if you're not good looking, you are judged by, and don't tell me people do not judge you by your looks in real life. If you have bad skin, if you're short, if you're overweight, if you're bald, if whatever, people look at you, and especially if you're a woman, and people look at you and judge you, and you see that in their eyes, and you must take that step back to protect yourself. But in Second Life, you don't have that. Everybody is, good looking. And you know what? That's great, because that has equalized the playing field. Everybody looks how they want. Let me put it that way. And that equalizes the playing field. And that means that people aren't judged, that they can put forward what they want, their hopes, their dreams, and build on that, because they don't have to be judged by how they look. I think that is incredible. And I think that gives a lot of opportunity to people, because, it's a given. So who you are and what you're doing and who your character is, that's what really speaks. Because, Feenan, everybody is good looking.
and yet, even in here, we do see that there are some biases. I mean, certainly, and I know Hydra and I have had this conversation in the past where, there, and other people as well, who have decided their avatar should be a furry of some kind or a tiny of some kind. That, even within here, I mean, if you deviate too much from an expected norm of, standards of beauty and intelligence and whatever else, that, there's some biases that do show up in here.
Let me ask you, who's limited there? If someone is putting you down because you're a furry or a tiny or green or blue, whose limitation is it? I tell you, there are people who say ugly things, and I can walk away from them. And you know what? Their punishment is they have to be like that. I can walk away.
But is that much different from what happens in the real world? I mean, to the same extent, same argument can be used inside the real world, right? I mean, you've met me. I'm not I don't exactly look anywhere near like my avatar.
But I can look at your face and I see your avatar, and I'm, of course, everybody knows I'm much bustier in real life. That's not true. But I can see that's a tough one, feeling, because when you meet people that in Second Life, that's a whole other ball game. Because when you see them, you're seeing not just them. It's like when I met Sloane. I love Sloane. I love Sloane, and I saw her, and I was like, oh my God, that's you. But I had already felt a deep sense of closeness to her before I met her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess to some extent. I mean, it's an interesting contrast, because I mean, one of the things that I've seen over the years, and I'm not sure how far back into. I think we were talking a little bit of this before, and you were mentioning that your background goes back about as far as mine does into this type of stuff. But I mean, if you go back to the days of Usenet and IRC and ARPANET and all this, very early, late 1980, early 1990 type thing, we saw a lot of this particular type of stuff even inside a one-dimensional chat room, right? where people became very enamored and very close to one another based upon the cerebral, what was being typed on the page.
It's also projection.
Yeah, but then like lots of relationships got started in things like IRC and chat rooms and what have you, until people met in real life, and then all of a sudden their expectations fell apart. I mean, do you see this being substantially different?
To some extent, I do. And I'll tell you, and I think that we all feel this way. We've all had our first online crush, right? That you're talking to someone, and all of a sudden their text is lighting up the entire world for you. You cannot believe this person sees and feels the same way that you do, and it's incredible and it's a magic. And it is a lot projection, I think. I mean, I'm not going to say that for everyone or for always. Let's just say it was for me. I'll speak personally. And I think that there's the possibility of projecting because you only see that text. And what the parallel I'll make with Second Life is this. In Second Life, it's always a honeymoon. And I saw the movie Life 2.0, and this is what it made me think of. It's always a honeymoon. The house is always clean. There are never dishes to do. You don't have to argue about what's for dinner, right? It's always a honeymoon. And when you meet someone, you meet a person that has not only bodily needs, but, bodily functions. I mean, it's different when you meet somebody up close, but at the same time, because you share so much in world, and we do let our defenses down and our guards down, and we do open up, and, you can have a conversation. Think of the people that you know in real life and how long your conversations with them are or how much time you speak to them. And then think about being virtually. It's like, I don't know, it's just our relationships get very deep because of the amount of time also we spend with people. And I guess that I found that in meeting people from Second Life in real life, I feel I know them and I care for them because I've shared so much online. There's an enormous warmth. It's different than that first online text relationship that I had where I thought, oh my God, this person is so great, because it was a lot of projection.
Right. So when you, because I mean, you had the opportunity in Boston at the Second Life Communities Conference last August to meet a whole pile of people. Obviously in real life, we were all in Boston at the time. When you're meeting people, when you've met them online, and then all of a sudden you meet them in real life, and you have this opportunity that you can see them in the flesh, and you can see, as you say, you can see what their physical needs are beyond their what they do, right? You can see whether they're a good dresser, or whether they look after their body, or whether maybe they've got some type of a disability or whatever else. That I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I find it does influence in some ways the relationship to a certain extent. But at the same time, then I find that when you come back away from that, it's sort of like, oh, well, yeah, but this person is still the avatar that I know and love and want to work with and want to do things with. And it's almost, to me, as if they're two separate people. I don't know if you find the same thing. I don't know if you find that there's a
Not only do I not find them separate people, Phelan, I think that we're all connected. I think in some kooky way, when I go to sleep at night, I hear all of us singing together, and I know that we're all part of something that's very important and meaningful, whether we're in Second Life. And I think that there's also something to be said for Second Life. So you've experienced this, I know, synchronicity or kismet, when like, oh my God, exactly the perfect person at exactly the perfect time is there. It's amazing. You know, did we pull that person in front of us? Did we make that person happen? You know, if the man didn't exist, the moment would have created him or her. Is that a factor? But it blows my mind that this happens. And you know why it happens? Because we make ourselves vulnerable to let it happen. In real life, we have to, as I said, protect ourselves or have certain things that must get done. But here we really can open up. And in that moment, in that risk, in that chance that we take is such tremendous growth and such tremendous potential. And I know I had mentioned to this before. It's like the stuff that we can make. The fact that this is also an economy, and you can make money from things that you make here. I mean, I'm dying to write a blog called The Wealth of Second Nations, because I think it was a genius move to allow people to make and own things, because what this has created is indeed a world and indeed a real economy. And I feel like asking Stiletto Moody, did you know 10 years ago you'd make $1 million making virtual shoes? I mean, did anybody know they would be making tiny boats or giant rockets or leaves or roses or diamonds or chairs? I mean, what an opportunity, and what a chance. But you do not have that chance unless you take that step, unless you take that risk, unless you make that first pair of shoes that aren't great looking, or chair, or show, or whatever. You must begin.
So earlier you were talking about the avatar and the in effect the avatar allows us to, and maybe I'm paraphrasing incorrectly here, so maybe correct me on this, but I mean the idea that the avatar actually allows us to recreate ourselves from the inside out. Into the person that we're capable of being, not necessarily the person that we appear to be, or the person that we feel we are, or the person that we may feel that we're limited to.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, when when we close our eyes, that's the person we really are, right? But when you close your eyes, you can't see anything. But here, you can make that person who you want. This is one of my favorite stories, and it became very clear to me one night after the show. An avatar was there, Raw Milk 90, and he had his usual avatar was an alien, and then he was a prince, and then he was a cockroach, and then he was a spaceship, and then he was a dragon, and then he had folders. I hadn't really realized this at the time, but he had folders that he kept dragging onto himself, right? These different avatars. And I'm looking at this avatar, which is a person at home, and I'm thinking, wow, this is the same person. He's just putting on these different outsides. And I said, this is just soul wrapping. The skin is merely a wrapping for our soul. And it is the same. I'm now pounding on my chest. It's the same here. My skin, and I'm pinching myself in real life, is merely a wrapping for my soul. What we are capable is not what we are outside, indeed, but it is what we are inside. And the fact that we can make... Yes, go ahead.
Well, it could be argued to a certain extent, though, because I mean, when we're born, we each have an equal opportunity to be the quote unquote the beautiful people in life. I mean, you've met me. I'm not exactly a skinny person, right? But I mean, the only thing that's stopping me from, looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger is, the 6 hours a day that you spend inside the gym and laying off the French fries a little bit more than I probably should, right? So I mean, to a certain extent, notwithstanding the people that have legitimate disability concerns. Okay, so notwithstanding those particular types of circumstances, but do the rest of us not have an equal opportunity to do that in real life as well?
There's equal opportunity and there's equal opportunity. If you're, very wealthy, you could just go to a plastic surgeon or a spa. You could buy it. Right. So, or yes, I mean anybody can, I guess, eat healthier, exercise more, and these are choices. And I also know of stories, and that's your own prerogative. I happen to think people who are a little heavy are more attractive. My avatar is a little bit heavier than I am in real life. I'm very happy. I'm very happy that I can do that, actually. But I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. The interesting thing I think, however, is this idea that we have a certain measure of control, whether or not we're talking about being inside Second Life or outside Second Life. And I guess there's a couple of questions that come to mind, and I'm just trying to figure out which one I want to ask first. To a large extent, the suggestion then is that there are barriers to our internal fulfillment that come down once we become once you become an avatar, once you get involved with this particular type of an environment. And I don't know, because to be quite honest, I actually really hadn't even thought about that consideration until you started talking about some of these concepts. I'm sort of wondering what some of those barriers might be that differentiate between why we sometimes can be so much more as an avatar and yet can't seem to achieve the same success when it comes to being, inside the real world.
Because the real world comes with a whole different level of emotional and psychological attachments. I have thought that in virtual world that we are in some cases and I too much for real life, too smart, too driven, too intense, too shy, too full of feeling, too focused, too whatever. And here, we don't feel that way because we're all too much for real life, in a sense. And we all understand that we've come here to give and to find something. I don't know if I'm 100% right in this. This is a gut feeling that I have, and a feeling that I also have about real life. I'm not a shy person. I guess you know that. But there's a shyness about me in real life that I have to push myself a bit more, that I find that when I'm in Second Life, or I've got things I've got to do. I've got to book this person, I've got to write this show, I've got to find these assets, I've got to, get this script going, I've got to, I'm able to move very happily and very productively through the things that I've set out for myself to do, and so it really works for me. I mean, I'm being very vulnerable. I'm being very open about who I am, but I'm I feel very comfortable. Obviously, I feel very comfortable in this environment, and I also feel very connected to everybody who's in this audience, and to you, and to the people who are watching also. But I think that it's because you can say, gee, there are no barriers. No one can make you feel bad unless you let them. But we all have those voices in our head, right? Feeling we all have those voices of people who've said things that aren't the most positive. And we come here, and you know what? We don't have to hear those voices. We can create our own world and our own dreams. And when you start gaining ground in that, when you start taking those small steps and you own those steps, you say, you know what? I'm going to do more, and I'm going to do more. And then you can excite and enthuse other people, because the platform for virtual worlds is excellent for communication, for reaching a large number of people. I've got, 5,000 people on my friends list? I can't reach 5,000 people outside of that. We can really be effective here because we can reach a larger audience, we can deliver an impactful statement, and from education how enormous this platform is for being able to give lectures to people all over the world at the same time.
Yeah, certainly. From my perspective, this is such an incredible environment in order to do things here. I think this actually ties into something that was just mentioned inside the local chat here, and so I'm going to ask the question a little bit slightly differently here. But with regards to this idea that there quote unquote are no barriers and what have you, what type of advice would you give to somebody like Allura who's out there that wants to be a producer like you and to create a brand? How do you feel that people that are coming into this environment that didn't get the opportunities of this being such a new and fresh environment like when you and I started, how would you encourage them in order to get established in building their own brand,
what they want,
their own identity, reality?
I think just like anything, you have to do it. I think if you want to be a painter, you cannot hold up a Turner or a Bernard late period and say, oh, this is the mark I've got to meet. You have to meet your own mark to begin with. You've got to start doing it. You have an idea for a show. You must understand this is a virtual platform. Anything can happen. You're going to do something live. Again, anything can happen. If you're going to do a film and you're going to construct it in scenes, that gives you a little more control, obviously. If you want to produce a live show, you have talk to me after the thing, and I'll tell you. But basically, you set it out and you start. The first show that I did in April of 2008, it's not the show I did 2 weeks ago. You grow. You must give yourself the chance to grow. And I will say this about producing art, and certainly about producing entertainment content on a virtual plane, and that is, you don't do it unless you have an ego. Nobody gets involved in entertainment or production unless they have an ego. But unless you are egoless, you will never improve. You must say, how can I be better? What can I do better? And there's a part that does not want to hear, I could have done that better, or smoother, or finer. There's a part of the ego that says, no, I'm great. But you got to put that part aside and say, how can I make this better? Because unless you can take a cold, hard, and clear look at your own work, you can't improve. Yeah, I think that's very important.
certainly, though, I mean, it's not all about one person. I mean, it's quite a production. I mean, to put on the first question, it's not just yourself. It's yourself plus Treat TV plus the other people that are backstage looking after getting all the the guests prepared and sorted out and everything else.
Yes, and I will say that putting on a live show where I work with Treat TV, who run the cameras, and they're in Australia, and they're incredibly professional, is different than when I'm working on Machinima for, let's say, Linden Labs, or producing a Machinima for another client, and I'm working with the directors. We generally use Fraps, by the way, which is a fairly ubiquitous program. But I will also say, people turn on a Fraps program and use a fly cam and record, and they think I've made Machinima, and that's true. But there's a difference between in all art, I think.
Well, you have to start some.
Yeah, I mean, there's and it's all the things that are in filmmaking that you've got to think about: cinematography, music, sound, composition, the props, costumes, sets. It really is all the same stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, you make mistakes as you go along, and you learn from them.
Yeah, yeah, of course you do.
So I'm going to ask the terminal question.
And let me just say this, and that's why when people say, you do Machinima, I want to do a Machinima like you, and then they say, I've got 20 minutes, tell me how.
Yeah, I love those questions. Yeah.
It's not a paint by number. It's a skill, and it's a craft. You can't ask Francois Truffaut, that Day for Night was a very 400 blows. That was a good movie. I want to make a movie like that. How do I do that? Do you understand? And if I don't answer, or if I can't tell you, it's not because I don't want you to be a great artist, but it's because I can't tell you. You have to. It's like you got to make that journey yourself. We all inspire each other. I see things in films by other filmmakers, and I'm very inspired and enthused and happy and excited and wow to see it. And I hope that the work that I produce makes other people feel that way too. But you know what I mean. You must do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the interesting things that I find, and this is what I find really encourages me in terms of a lot of different things that I see going on inside virtual worlds, is that there are so many people that are trying to learn the ins and outs of what it means to be virtual and what it means to conduct business virtually. And there's so much that we've learned over the last 4, 5, 6 years in terms of doing this, that it surprises me every time somebody walks into this environment and says, oh, this is a virtual environment. Tell me what it is that I need to know. And to a large extent, I don't know if you found the same thing, but
first I got to get a gun.
No. Shooting zombies. But I mean, it's a new way of thinking about things, and people have to get over that mindset in terms of trying to come to grips to understand really what this environment is about. Most new people that I've seen come in here, the very first thing that they do is they try to recreate everything that they've got in real life. And then after a year or so of doing that, then all of a sudden they realize that, oh, wait a second, I don't really need to do that. I can do all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
But they were never mentally prepared for that when they first started.
Well, there are people, I mean, what is the task that you set before yourself and what it is that you have to get there. For example, Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz was able to make it back to Kansas because she was able to effectively get rid of the witch and overcome the various obstacles. I use that for a metaphor for there are things that we need to do or want to do, but sometimes we just can't make it happen immediately, right? If you can't, and she did it, with the help of friends, and she did it in a very long journey. I think that if you need to do something, it's just like that. Use that as a fantasy, as a movie, but you can also think in real life. If you need to do something in real life, and the history of entrepreneurs, let's say, or industry in every area is filled with people who had to overcome obstacles to make something happen. I don't know how to tell someone, focus on your goal. And, no, I do know how to tell someone, focus on your goal, to do what it is that you want to do, and then, slowly make it happen. It just, if you want to make something happen, if it's in real life or Second Life, you must see the tasks before you. You must make them one step at a time. And sometimes you're not going to be able to make that next step because something's happened. You have to take the dog to the hospital or, whatever it is. So you have to give yourself a lot of room to get to your goals. You must have that goal firmly in your mind and do something every single day to make it happen. And then give yourself a break on the day that you couldn't. But it's like anything. You forward, march, head down, blinders on. You got to mush.
Straight. Find the goal. Work the plan. Set up a plan. Work the plan. Right. That's what we tell people in business when they first get involved. Is that you don't do anything without a plan, and then you work to the plan, and you don't get sidetracked off it.
That's right. And you must do it, and you must make it happen. And the way to do that is to get a good team together. If there are skills that you have, which you're very good at, you can find other people. And one wonderful thing about being in Second Life is that I've been very fortunate to find people and to be with people, to meet people and work with people whose skills complement my own. I don't think there's any filmmaker in real life. It's like at the Oscars. The person who picks up the award for Best Picture is the producer. Right? The director picks up the director award. The screenwriter picks up the screenwriter award. Best actress, best actor, etc. The producer picks up the award for Best Picture. And it's because the producer has a team with which they work. There are very few motion pictures and very few films in any sense that are written, produced, directed, acted in, costumed, props, set, lighting, sound, all by one person. All by one person.
Yeah.
So I think that part of the reason that the work has been so successful for me is because I am able to work with just some wonderful directors and great building and asset people. And sound people, of which I'm very, very proud and happy to say that I've worked with, and I certainly wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't be able. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this then, because that's actually a very good segue into this next question I've been wanting to ask. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that look up to Pooky Amsterdam in terms of what you're doing for the community, what you're doing for media in general, the community that you're helping to build here. Who does Pooky Amsterdam look up to?
I'm sorry?
Who does Pooky Amsterdam look up to?
I look up to a lot of people, and I guess I look out for inspiration from most people. I look up to the people that I'm close with. When you say look up to, in what way? I look up to, for example, Roscoe Teardrop, who's a fantastic director and editor and incredibly knowledgeable in film. And it's been a great experience working with him. Phenomenal. I look up to Rob Wag-Soothsayer, who's been with me since day 3. I look up to Bevan. And Rob is also a wonderful filmmaker, and we're working on a project as well now. I look up to Draxter Desprez, whose work I enjoy very much and look forward to doing some other things with him as well. I look up to Chantal Harvey, who puts together the MMIF, and I have great respect for her organizational abilities and for her ability to really be on the forefront of the community. I think that there are great. I look up to Lauren Wayland, who's amazing and brave and funny, and I look up to you. I look up. I could name a lot of people that I look up to, and I appreciate what you're saying about me. I don't think of myself like that. I don't say, "Oh, the brand's getting up," or "The brand needs some coffee." I do not think like that. I have a lot of tasks every day.
No, I saw you in Boston. There were days that the brand needed coffee. Let me tell you.
I have a lot of things that I've got to do every day because there are real marks and commitments I've got to make. I mean, at Sunday at 4:30, that show is on. I need those people in that chair. You know, a Pat Love, who is a remarkable person. I look up to her. She's a phenomenal person and very talented and incredible with people. And I look up to Emo and Cat 2 Kit, the Tinies, and also from whom I've learned a great deal. You know, I'm head down, blinders on, and I'm too busy to think to really think too much about myself. I just honestly have too much to do in a day.
Mm. Listen, I need to sort of cut at this point for a couple of minutes, just so then we've hit the end of our hour. So I'm going to allow Mel and Robert to do the sign off for us. But I'd like to ask if you would stick around for a little while and take some questions for the audience and continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Of course I will.
Excellent. Okay. So let me just say before we sign off on the television audience here that I'd like to send out a big thank you to Robox's Hacks and Mel Burns with Metaverse TV for helping us to get this show up and on the air. And big thank you to Bevan Whitfield for doing the production for us. And, we're going to be back in about 3 weeks. Bevan will be popping in who the next guest is, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because I always butcher it, and she's going to have to teach me how to pronounce the name before we get there. But thank you all very much, and after we sign off, if you stick around, that will be great. We'll be continuing the conversation with Pooky Amsterdam.